In this video, we're going to show you how to make biltong. This traditional dried, cured meat from southern Africa is made by marinating beef or game meats in vinegar and spices and then air drying it over several days. It's a high protein snack or emergency food you'll be glad you know how to make. I'll take you step by step through this traditional air drying recipe and also try methods in 2 different dehydrators to compare the results. Stick around to the end and I'll show you how I made the special biltong box that I use in this video. You likely have everything you need to build it right now or after any disaster. Download the Start Preparing Survival Guide to help you prepare for any disaster. I'll post a link in the description and comments section below, or visit cityprepping.com/get started for a free guide to help you get started on your journey of preparedness. What you need. You'll need some basic equipment to process and dry the meat. A sharp knife and cutting board, mortar and pestle or device to grind down the spices, small pan for warming the spices, bowl to marinate, dehydrators or a biltong box. Remember, at the end I'll show you how to build a biltong box for mere pennies out of materials you probably already have on hand. Ingredients. 4 pounds beef. Sirloin top or bottom rounds are good cuts for this. Favor slices with long sections of grain flowing in a single direction. 3/4 cup vinegar, 1/4 cup red wine vinegar. This is the blend that I use for just a hint of residual flavor. You can use any vinegar except balsamic. 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, 4 tablespoons of coarse salt. If using granulated salt, try to reduce to 3 tablespoons. Recipes will vary wildly online along with complaints about being too salty. Minimally use a half tablespoon per pound. I find that 1 tablespoon of coarse salt, coarse flake Himalayan or sea salt per pound is best. 2 tablespoons of coriander seeds, 1 tablespoon of black peppercorns, 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. Optional ingredients include chili flakes, fennel seeds, and I use a tablespoon of each. Instructions. Prepare the meat. Cut the beef, remove most of the fat and any gristle from the meat. Slice the beef into strips approximately 1 inch thick, 2 inches wide, and up to 8 inches long. You see here the grain in my meat ended up being 2 pieces. I thought it was only 1 piece when I bought it. That means my biltong can only be as long as the cutting with the grain will allow. Ideally, you want it longer. I slice these pieces with the meat's grain so I can cut the finished dry product against the grain. That will provide me with less chewy, tender pieces. This specific cut ensures that the meat cures properly and has a desired texture and flavor. Marinate the meat. Immerse the meat in 3/4 cup vinegar, 1/4 cup red wine vinegar, and 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce in a large container or bowl. Mix by hand to ensure full coverage of the liquid. Cover and set aside. Marinate the meat strips in the mixture for 3 to 4 hours to begin the curing process. After at least 4 hours have passed, remove the meat strips from the vinegar mixture. Squeeze and pat dry with paper towels to remove excess moisture. Reserve the vinegar mixture for later. Season the meat. Toast coriander seeds and any other spices in a dry pan, but not the peppercorns. This will only take a few minutes, and you should really start to smell them as they release their aroma. They may toast a bit, and that's fine, but don't let them burn. This process awakens the oils and the spices. Place them in your spice grinder or a mortar and pestle. Add in the peppercorns. Then rough grind them, leaving some seed shells intact. Add the coarse salt and grind a little more. Then add the brown sugar. There's no need to grind that in, just mix it with your hand. Pull out 2 tablespoons of the dry spices for later use. Place the remaining spices thoroughly over the meat strips. Work it over the pieces with your hands, ensuring an even coating. I then place it all in a Ziploc bag and mix it around from the outside. Let it rest for another 3 hours. Rinse and hang the meat. Once that time has passed, rinse the spiced meat strips in the reserved vinegar mixture to remove excess spices. Then, I like to grind that reserved tablespoon of spices further and add it back to the meat. This gives it a nice seasoned crust. If you have longer strips, you would want to weigh them at this point because you're looking for a 50% reduction in weight for your finished process as it dries. Because my strips are so small from accurate grain cutting, I don't need to weigh these. Run your wire through one end of the strip and hang them in your biltong box in a well-ventilated, isolated place for 5 to 10 days. I'll also be placing them in 2 different dehydrators on their lowest settings so I can compare the results. With the biltong box, I'm able to poke the wire through the top of the box and give it a few twists to create a sort of meat locker I can seal by closing it up. The main thing you want here is to avoid direct sunlight and have a good airflow. This is why I added the screen to the box, which I'll show you how to do later. This will allow airflow through the sealed box and keep out any unwanted insects. After sealing the box, I place all the drying devices in the garage and I put a fan on the low setting at the lower vent of the biltong box to maintain a constant airflow. The general time in a dehydrator to obtain the desired results is 24 to 36 hours. It will depend on the thickness of the meat and the fat content. You want the temperature to be between 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent the meat from drying too quickly. My garage is right in that perfect zone between 80 and 85 degrees during the summer. Check for readiness. The biltong is ready when it is shrunk to half its original size, feels firm yet flexible when gently squeezed, and has attained a dark red or burgundy interior color. This slight flexibility indicates the ideal residual moisture level, ensuring the biltong is neither too dry nor too hard. Again, with longer strips, you can weigh it again when you think it is done. You're going to want somewhere near a 50% reduction in weight. Slicing and storage. After completing the drying and aging process, slice the biltong into bite-sized pieces or strips when ready to eat. Cutting against a grain will give you shorter, more tender pieces, while cutting with the grain will result in longer, chewier pieces. You're going to want to slice it as thin as you can with the sharpest knife you have. The drier it is, the more you may struggle. I also see using a sandwich meat slicer to get incredibly thin slices for sandwiches. Slice only as you eat and consume it because slicing it will expose the center of the meat that had less exposure to the curing and preserving ingredients. It will increase surface exposure to air. It's best to store the biltong in its seasoned and dried whole form and slice it only when you plan to consume it within a week. I found the dehydrator without temperature control over 100 degrees, and after 3 days, it had a more jerky-like consistency and lacked the burgundy color interior. The dehydrator with the temperature control set between 80 to 85 degrees for 4 days was more like traditional biltong. The best was easily the biltong box that I'm going to show you how to make in a moment. And that was approximately 85 degrees for 5 days, but probably could have gone 7 to 10 days for a bit more of a drier product. The taste is difficult to describe. It's tender with a light flavor from the spices. I could see adding maybe a little more red wine to the marinade. It reminds me of a lightly more cured meat like a prosciutto. If you've ever had that, just think of it as a super mild salami, though that flavor note may have come more from the fennel I added than the coriander. I could definitely see myself eating this as a good source of protein on any hike. It's a lot less salty than traditional jerky tends to be, and if you don't eat it all immediately, and it tastes so good you might, store the whole unsliced biltong in a cool, dry place. It can be frozen and last up to a year, and it will last a week or longer when stored in a paper bag or jar. Pack it in a salt for long-term storage to dry even further, inhibit bacterial growth, and extend its shelf life to several weeks or even months. Biltong box. To build the biltong box that I use in this video, you only need a box of some kind, the ability to cut holes in it, some wire, some screening material, and some glue or duct tape. You can use a wooden box or a plastic container if you want to build something sturdier. The goal is to allow the circulation of dry air while keeping out any flies or bugs. I like using screens, so I simply cut about a half-inch slit about 6 to 8 inches long on one side's bottom. I will repeat this cut on the opposite wall, but a few inches down from the top. The precise cut of the hole is up to you. We'll be covering it so I don't feel the need to measure here. Then I can cover that hole from the inside with a piece of screen material and some duct tape around the edges. These holes will facilitate circulation and keep any bugs out. If your environment is not warm enough, I've seen some people put a light bulb or heating source in the box to achieve 70 to 80 degrees necessary. My garage in the summer is pushing the outer limits of that range, so I'll just use a simple fan to push a gentle breeze through. I've also seen some people hook up battery fans or small PC fans to achieve that gentle circulation or air from the bottom through the top. Your circumstances, temperature, and humidity will have to guide you on the best practices for your situation. But remember that this technique of making biltong is centuries old. That's long before electricity and only requires you to have a bug-free environment and circulating drying air. To hang the meat, I simply run a wire through one end, poke both ends of that wire through the top of the box with the open flaps facing me, and twist it at the top to secure it. I hang each piece so they're not touching, then close the flaps, seal it with some tape, and then come back in about 5 to 7 days to take a look and see if it's done. It really couldn't be simpler. If you'd like a printable version of this recipe, visit cityprepping.com/biltong. There you're going to find this recipe and hundreds more, everything from how to make beer to beef stew to the ultimate jerky. If you'd like to see more specifically jerky-type recipes, you can check those videos out on the side of the screen, and I'll put links in the description and comments section below. As always, stay safe out there.